Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Michael Dickman, Chief Product Officer at Gigamon, and Joe Slowik, Senior Manager, Threat Intelligence and Detections Engineer at Gigamon. So, given the rising threat of ransomware attacks today, and certainly with the way that our world has changed exponentially over the last while, Joe, what do you believe are some of the biggest obstacles cybersecurity professionals face today?
So, in terms of the ransomware threat, cyber professionals are facing an increasingly hostile environment, which sounds strange when you consider we've been talking about the increasing threat of ransomware for years now, but it certainly hasn't gone away and it just seems to be getting ever worse with time. And as part of that, analysts really need to improve and enhance their ability to even understand what's going on within their environments to find the precursors to this activity. So an emphasis on understanding the threats and how they perform, and then the visibility to follow up with being able to identify and ideally hunt down these sorts of entities within networks in order to prevent them from doing something or kick them out prior to being able to act on their objectives of locking networks and information.
Certainly, and especially also even tightening up within the organization themselves and educating their employees and their organization as a whole. And Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the ransomware that's now being combined with exfiltration and other aspects to monetize in multiple layers is definitely upping the ante. I think the other thing we're seeing is kind of two ends of the spectrum. If you look at some of the attacks, some of them are moving extremely rapidly, to encrypt data in a ransomware fashion. At the same time, I think the dwell times and the persistent threats are still very long. And so you have these kind of two ends. And so just talking about, well, what's a mean dwell time may not be the right thing anymore. And it's just another example of the increasing complexity in the threat landscape and the arms race between, defenders and attackers.
No, well said. And the big question here is how do you suggest organizations can mitigate these risks and position themselves better against future attacks? And that's certainly at the top of mind for all organizations and something that everybody is worried about. Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. And the problem with the question or with the position that many individuals are in is there is no single answer. Rather, it's a collection of solutions that need to be taken advantage of or applied in concert with one another in order to meet this threat. So a combination of hardening networks, reducing attack surface, but also increasing visibility and insights into one's own environment, but also, as you hinted in the lead up to this question, improving things like regular interactions with the network and improving, I hate the term, but the phrase security hygiene in order to try to get better outcomes. And it's really through emphasizing all of these different aspects that organizations can put themselves in a position to mitigate or reduce this threat.
Yeah, Michael, what would you say your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think the defense in depth, the layered approach, taking a holistic approach makes a lot of sense. So there needs to be strategy around protection, around detection, around mitigation, the whole thing. To be a little more specific, there's been a lot of attention on endpoint security lately, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think it's also important at the same time to remind that some of those endpoints with IoT devices and others are much more difficult to have a managed or an agent-based security approach. And so making sure that any thoughts on endpoint include, what's the IoT strategy? A second thing that I would say that's key right now is network-based detection in terms of all the intercommunications, the lateral movement within a network or movements between entities, endpoints, resources across networks, and the combination of saying what's happening on this particular endpoint, how do I know what's going on with IoT, and then how do I look at all the communications? I think that gives a great platform or a foundation for a broader detective control in combination, obviously, with protective and others.
Well, certainly. And I see that, the whole environment now is being very proactive in its security posture rather than just being reactive post problem. Michael, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, I mean the proactive is key, and so I think, and definitely want to bring Joe into this because we see more interest in proactive threat hunting rather than waiting for oh my gosh, something happened, now how do I handle that? And so we're seeing our more sophisticated customers at Gigamon spend more time and attention on that, and so they will actively look and seek for weaknesses, looking for little hints that something is maybe in the works but not yet occurred. And I think that's a key component. And we definitely have customers who've headed off significant incidents with that approach, again, in combination with a holistic posture. Joe, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. I mean, there's certainly a lot there. And one of the things I would just remind those who are listening is that security is more than just preventing bad things from taking place. It's a question of identifying things as they're occurring, responding to events when they happen, and then emphasizing resilience and recovery in order to get the network back in a good state following a breach. And one of the critical aspects of that is being able to perform root cause analysis and to thoroughly investigate items that have taken place. And so again, having the data at hand and being able to query it, whether we're talking endpoint logs, network visibility, or other areas, in order to really address these questions and then get the organization back up and running into a known good state.
Well, that's very well said. And can you give me a rundown of who Gigamon is and what your primary focus areas are, Michael, as Chief Product Officer?
Yeah, sure. So Gigamon has long been a leader in the visibility space. It pioneered the industry with network packet brokers years ago, and it's moved and broadened quite a bit beyond there. And so now we'll start with a foundation of visibility, but bring that visibility to all environments. So whether that's on premises or cloud, whether that's bare metal, virtual, or container. And again, that goes back to this idea of defense in depth and a layered approach where you have views everywhere. So you can have, in this case, all right, security detections across the board. And so Gigamon does that through physical, virtual, and containerized services everywhere, and then also provides analytic capabilities. So allowing you to look at application metadata, and then where Joe specializes is specifically in the network detection and response space, where you take that visibility all the way into a full detection and response structure for threats. And so really it's around that entire stack. And the premise that we like to talk about is any workload, any environment, any destination or tool, and making all of that work as seamlessly as possible.
Nice. And Joe, SOC burnout has been a hot topic over the past 2 years. How can security teams prevent it from getting worse in the future?
Well, like anything else, the answer is complex and not just a single thing. There's a odd conflict between requiring greater visibility and insight into what's happening within environments, but then also dealing with the volume of information that's generated as a result. And so developing mechanisms, automated or otherwise, to filter and identify high fidelity signal in what's otherwise a fairly significant amount of noise is pretty critical. And that's honestly one of the things that I do with my team within Gigamon's Threat Insight, is to try to guide individuals using the solution to better understand and better identify things that are of specific interest, instead of having to look for not just a needle in a haystack, but a needle in a stack of very similar looking needles.
Sure. And can you please describe the latest release of Gigamon Threat Insight guided SaaS NDR solution, Michael?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. We tried to address a few customer pain points with their latest release. And a lot of those were around how much data actually and how easy it is to bring that data into insight and action. And so in terms of the visibility piece, we've now introduced a 365 data retention, meaning you look back for an entire year. So it's not only detections happening now or recently, but actually can I look back both for proactive investigations and even reactive when a new threat comes to life and I want to check if something had occurred in the past. So that's a really key aspect, is that 365-day look back. In addition, guided playbooks, so that, let's say I have an alert or an instance and I don't know exactly what to do next. Through folks like Joe and then the threat research team here, we actually give a very guided approach that says, hey, here are the right next set of actions. So there might be 10 specific things to check, and the system will automatically go through those, run everything, present you the data in an easy to consume manner, and then also provide an environment for collaborative investigation. So Joe and I can work together across time zones, across locations, and share notes in terms of what we're doing and what we're checking in the context of a particular investigation. So those highlights, I think, really will help with effectiveness, use of time, and also just the power of what we can see and when. So we're very excited about that coming out.
Well, that's wonderful. That was going to be actually a question I was going to ask. How important is it to do information share? A lot of organizations, kind of little silos, everyone working side, getting their stuff done. But the way that you're describing, obviously, information sharing across organization and even beyond is critical in order to have the best security out there. So thank you for that. And what are some differences between Gigamon Threat Insight and other products on the market? And what industry challenges does the product solve? And that's for Joe or Michael. Please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, maybe I'll give a quick high level, and then Joe, you could double click. So at a high level, we are a SaaS service, and most of the others are on premises. So that is actually quite different. So in an on-premises service, the data stays on-prem, and that has certain advantages. But being a SaaS service, it's much easier for the SOC. There's no tuning, there's no maintenance, and all the analytics and research that we do on the back end can be updated very frequently and is based on our total visibility of all the data that we see while retaining, obviously, confidentiality, security for each individual customer. So it's faster, it's easier, it's low maintenance, all the benefits of SaaS versus on-premises that we've seen over the years. I think that's a huge structural difference. In terms of how we do what we do, we're very proud of the threat research team. And as a result, we do have a much lower false positive rate, or higher quality detections, we believe, than others that are out there. And so on average, we'll have fewer alerts, but those alerts are more meaningful. And that's an intentional decision, which we think is the right call and the right approach. And that's another differentiator. And then the last piece I would say is we have what we call technical support managers, or TSMs. And they're in a way like a hybrid between cybersecurity experts and customer success managers. And so they're really around, how do I make that SOC get the value from the product and the experience, know what everything does, have regular updates. It's kind of what Joe was saying earlier about being proactive at every stage in the cycle, not just one or the other. And so that combination of the product architecture, the threat research approach, and the direct guidance from technical support managers, I do think sets the product apart.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Joe, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. And just from my somewhat narrower perspective on what Threat Insight does, just my role, my team's role within the product and within the space is developing a threat-aware, threat-based mechanism for developing playbooks, developing detections, developing visualizations into network environments. And so instead of just coming up with a sort of black box modeling approach and trying to look for what's weird. Instead, we take a very aggressive look of how precisely adversaries are operating, what the threat landscape looks like right now, and apply that knowledge and research into ways of interacting with the product to give us a very contextual way of guiding end users to interacting with their network data, which I think is I think it's the right approach. That's why I'm doing it. But I think it's also a very advantageous approach in that it narrows the scope from just pursuing things that are random anomalous indicators within an environment towards going after high confidence signatures or high confidence examples of adversary activity.
Excellent. And if you could leave our audience, each of you, with one final thought at the end of this discussion, what would that be around security and ransomware? And Joe, I'll start with you on that one.
That it's not easy. The main thing is to ensure a understanding of your own environment and risk tolerances, and then applying the not just tools, but also processes and procedures necessary in order to cope with these threats, and realizing it's going to be a little bit of an effort in order to get there.
Thank you. And Michael?
And I would go back to the old adage, you can't secure what you can't see. The visibility is so important.
Yes.
And it's very hard to see if you can't focus on what's important within the sea of information. And so those two layers are critical.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful discussion today. You both provided some wonderful insight, and I look forward to talking to you both again soon.
Thank you, Shira.
Thank you.
Thanks.